You're watching Channel Japan. Next up is Project Japan.
And this time we bring you a report on the Nikkei Asian Conference on Communicable Diseases, which is an issue that affects countries not just in Asia, but countries around the world.
Well, what's frightening is that not only do they affect the health of people, but there is a possible impact on economic activity. So obviously, speed is critical.
Absolutely. And in the case of Ebola, which caused a global scare, West African economies are said to have suffered huge losses.
Well, how big were the losses?
Yes, well, in the most seriously affected countries of Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone, the total economic impact reportedly exceeded $500 million, and that's nearly 5% of the combined GDP of the three countries.
Oh, that's a huge number.
It is, and during the conference, doctors who went to the affected areas reported on local conditions, and also new drug development was discussed.
Well, I've heard topics that weren't covered much until now, such as Zika virus, were brought up.
Yes, that's right. And also the Tokyo government is putting effort into countermeasures as it prepares for the 2020 Olympics and Paralympics. So take a look.
The Project Japan. Communicable diseases are diseases caused by pathogenic microorganisms invading the body. Around the world, 60% of deaths of children under 5 years old are said to be linked to communicable diseases. How should we deal with this threat? In April this year, a conference attended by a wide range of experts from industry, government and academia in Japan and abroad was held in Tokyo. The Nikkei Asian Conference of Communicable Diseases marks its third year this year.
Cooperation. Asian cooperation on infectious diseases, pandemic, preparedness, and response.
It's really uniting the countries to adopt a common direction and being able to influence country-specific strategies and approaches.
In 4 years, the Olympics will be held in Japan, in Tokyo. Many people will come in and go out. That's when communicable diseases will also move together.
In 2014, Japan reported its first case of dengue fever infection in 69 years. What's more, the Zika virus has been spreading through Central and South America, and there are reports of Japanese travelers returning from the region showing symptoms of the disease. From Ebola hemorrhagic fever to SARS, MERS, and avian influenza, outbreaks of communicable diseases overseas reported in the news aren't a faraway problem.
Communicable diseases are invisible to the eye, so people don't really have a proper understanding of them. There are diseases like influenza that even the healthiest person will contract. With all communicable diseases, everyone has the possibility of being infected. There's a constant possibility that various communicable diseases will enter a country, so responding calmly based on accurate information is extremely important.
Japan is in the midst of a national effort to deal with the threat posed by communicable diseases. And that's attracting the interest of the international community.
Communicable diseases, the health field, universal healthcare. The average person in Japan may not be aware of it, but it's an asset of Japan that's unique around the world. If we can take that across the world, we can make people everywhere happy and also energize Japanese companies. Efforts were being made in various places, but you could say they ended just as dots and lines. We want to expand that into a full-scale initiative involving the whole of Japan. We want to carry out this initiative properly.
One of the communicable diseases that conference participants focused on the most was Ebola hemorrhagic fever, which shook the world in 2014. More than 10,000 people died, primarily in African countries. It began spreading in regions with underdeveloped medical systems. In some cases overseas, travelers to those regions were confirmed to have been infected, developing symptoms after returning home. To prevent communicable diseases that break out overseas from coming into the country, quarantine stations at Japanese airports and other facilities use thermography cameras to check if people arriving show symptoms such as a fever. But quarantine measures alone are not sufficient. In the event that a person infected with Ebola is confirmed in Japan, to which hospital should that person be transported and what treatment should be administered? Such training is also being carried out.
We designate a head doctor at St. Luke's Hospital, and below are AMED, the Health Ministry, and the Foreign Ministry.
The Ebola virus has a mortality rate of 50 to 80%. It's said to be the most deadly among viruses that have been discovered thus far. How will Japan deal with the threat it poses? Industry, government, and academia are strengthening coordination and putting in place a system of countermeasures. Dr. Takuya Adachi of Toshima Hospital visited Sierra Leone in West Africa at the request of the WHO to report on the Ebola outbreak there. He says seeing the conditions on the ground gave him an extremely big shock.
I think that there was quite a big difference between what was being reported in Japan and what local people were actually facing. Family infections were extremely common with this disease, followed by infections of medical staff treating severely ill patients. People who take action first, who extend a hand to help patients, are easily infected. An act of charity, you could say. I also think there was an extremely big negative impact in terms of how it affected the psychology of local people. This picture was taken in the midst of the outbreak. It was taken in the capital of Liberia. Even people suspected of having Ebola couldn't enter hospitals.
Communicable diseases inflict damage not just to a person's body, but also to the feelings of others who want to help. Dr. Adachi spoke of the reality he confronted there.
With Ebola, the condition of a healthy person will rapidly deteriorate and the patient will become worse quickly. By caring for such patients, family members will become infected. This was an extremely common occurrence.
Dr. Adachi visited the observation center, where people who've lost their families to the disease and their children who are suspected of being infected are quarantined. The director of this center was also infected with Ebola. While he survived, more than half of his family lost their lives to the disease. Dr. Adachi, who saw firsthand the reality of Ebola, says he felt there's more that Japan can do. There's one medicine developed by a Japanese company that's generating interest for its potential effectiveness against Ebola. At the conference, they reported that they are working with the French government to carry out clinical trials in Guinea. Fuji Film Group, which is better known in the photography and camera field, is the company that's hoping to put the drug into practical use. Fujifilm has long competed in the international market. But managing director Yuzo Toda says the communicable diseases field presents different challenges.
We need to speed up because this is a new science. We have something that's a first in Japan, and so we also need to make a system that's a first in Japan. With new things, there's always a gap with regulations created with conventional thinking. So it ends up taking too much time. In some cases, even if you make something great, it'll fall through midway. That's a sense of crisis we have.
To overcome the threat of Ebola, it's critical for Japanese companies and institutions to respond with speed. At the same time, countermeasures for communicable diseases that enter the country are an urgent issue. With the rapid growth of foreign tourists, Japan recently doubled its target for inbound visitors from 20 million to 40 million by 2020. One of the centers for Tokyo's efforts to fight communicable diseases is the Tokyo Metropolitan Institute of Medical Science.
This is a laboratory.
Their research spans a wide range of fields, including countermeasures for communicable diseases and cancer. At this laboratory, they are working on a project for the prevention and treatment of diseases such as influenza and hepatitis C.
In a densely populated place like Tokyo, when there's even one case of a communicable disease, we fear that it could have a tremendously severe impact. We have been putting an extremely big effort into this project from more than 20 years ago.
The aim of this laboratory is to give back to Tokyo citizens the results of its research.
One of our big goals is to find a way to deliver our results to patients. We work on ways to tie in basic research, to connect it to people. That's what we are constantly conscious about as we continue our research.
One of their achievements is about to be shaped into a vaccine that's effective against a new type of influenza virus.
We've collected the data to turn this into an actual vaccine, and we've gotten results showing that it's very effective. We want to turn this into something that people can use as quickly as possible. So, right now, we're starting preparations such as submitting applications together with various manufacturers.
A report on the results of this research was also delivered at the conference.
When we thought about what the requirements would be for a new H5N1 vaccine, we felt it had to have a high immunogenicity with just one inoculation and quickly generate an immune response. And because we don't know what grade will spread, we wanted to make something with wide-ranging cross-reactivity that can defend against unanticipated grades.
They say they are continuing research towards commercialization.
And that brings us to the end of this edition of Channel Japan. We have much more in store for you, so join us again next week.